Good afternoon to everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. My name's George Milliken. I work with Education Scotland and the digital learning team, and I'm really excited. It's because it's an amazing webinar from what we're speaking about planning it, but also because it's one of those ones I don't really have to do anything. So it's a double win for me, but I'm really excited to see a number of people on the call, and again some familiar faces. This call is looking at the Digital Xtra Fund, and we've got Kraig and Maha. I'll let you introduce yourselves to everybody in just a wee second. The first part is I'll do a wee bit at the start, just about what me and my team doing. It's no much with regards to this, so I'll hand over to the experts. But if there is anything that you're maybe trying to do with computing or clubs or anything else digital in your school, do get in touch with us. But I'll go through a wee bit. I've got a couple of quick slides, but and then I'll hand over to say Kraig and Maha for the main bit of the presentation. But if you want to introduce yourselves, please.
Yes, thank you, George, and thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you, George, for organising this. So, as mentioned, my name is Kraig Brown. I am the Partnerships and Development Manager for Digital Xtra Fund. I've been running the fund now for about 5.5 years, and my main role is to fundraise so that we can then award that to schools and organizations for extracurricular tech activities that engage young people in digital skills. But I also work with my colleague Maha here to deliver the grant awards, and there's a whole process which we'll chat a little bit more obviously as we get into it, but that's pretty much me. Maha.
Yeah, thanks, Kraig, and thanks, George, for giving us this opportunity, and thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Maha Abhishek. I'm the Communities and Grants Officer at Digital Xtra Fund. So as Kraig said, my main role is to support Kraig with the grant application, but also it's key to get those engagements with the young people and our industry partners. So we are supported by industry. So we get the engagement, giving them real world context. So that's where my role come in. So I facilitate those sort of engagement, but also if there is any support needed by any of our grant recipients regarding resource, lesson plans, or any sort of ideas, just to brainstorm, I'll be kind of the support they can come and ask after they are successful and after they are running the clubs. So that's kind of the role. I have a background in STEM education, so it kind of helps me to get that sort of tips and tricks on what works and what not. So yeah, that's kind of the role, to support the grant recipients once they are up and running. So I'll hand back to George, and then maybe after the quick chat we can crack on with the grant awards.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I think that the big one, I was really keen to try and get this in, I think, as early as possible. It'll be early next year that the fund becomes open for applications. But I know from my experience of being in school, it would usually drop on my desk after it was launched. So that might be shared in somebody in a local authority, or maybe passes to my head teacher. My head teacher might have no picked up on that, and by the time it comes to me, it's always quite late on, or just at that time, I'm getting report cards and parents' nights and things out the way, and I'm definitely going to apply, and then it would be something I would end up picking up quite late on. And I think the real strength of the application you could have here, if you're thinking about this just now and what you want to do before the award, and the fund even opens up. So, and I think it also gives us opportunity. I think Kraig and Maha, you run other webinars, I think, near the time anyway. So there's that opportunity to maybe go away and think about it, and then come back to some of those other sessions when you have a clear picture, rather than just turning up and saying, what can I do, or how does that work, or without having really tried to go through it. So it does give you a wee bit of a chance to get maybe a picture in your mind. But I've got a couple of quick slides I think I hope can just share, and I will share the slide set with you. There's just a few links. There's nothing particularly vital on it, but say they might come in handy just to grab some quick links. I turn off the subtitles on the slides just because they never quite pick me up as well as I would hope. So, I'm from Digital Learn Scott, the Digital Learning Teaching Team at Education Scotland. Our role, in fact, the next slide I'll talk just quickly about roles. The next part of the session, the most important part, we will Digital Xtra Fund, and we'll have an opportunity for some questions at the end. I will pop the link to what I've done is I've put a Jamboard there as well, because I've set this up on my Scottish Government Teams account. It won't keep a record of the conversation from the team, from the discussion tonight. So rather than using the chat and we lose those questions, some of which we might potentially have to come back to. What I've done is I've created a Jamboard, so that should open up for absolutely everybody. If you've got another device to hand, like your phone, you can scan the QR code, but I will also copy the link. I'll copy a hyperlink across to the chat for you in a wee second, and you can join the Jamboard from there. And that means you can put your questions onto post-its at any point during the session, and we might be able to pick them up as we go, or it might be ones, I say, they might be a wee bit trickier or quite a particular question, and we can come back to those. So again, feel free to put your names on your name and school if you want, or your contact details if you think you got a burning question you want us to come back to it, or you can keep them totally anonymous as well. It's whatever works for you. So I will share the link in a wee second if you don't have another device. If you do have a device, you can scan that QR code just before I move on to the next slide. So we have the Digital Learn team at Education Scotland, and we deal with the whole technology sector and also digital literacy and digital in the classroom, and that includes computing science, which is the bit I'm sure Kraig and Maha will make that really clear as well. But on that computing science strand as a curricular area, we support with that, and that will be the part you'll be using your digital Xtra fund towards. But we also have an improving gender balance and inequalities team at Education Scotland, and a big part of the grant is about reaching learners, for example, improving that gender balance by engaging more girls, but also learners that might identify as rural or from an ethnic minority. A minority ethnicity, sorry. And again, I'm sure Kraig and Maha can go through all of those things, but I think one of the ones that you might want to consider is that we do have a team that supports improving gender balance and equalities. That's their role almost exclusively, and it might be worth getting in touch with them before or as part of your application, so that you're not just trying to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of strategies and support available that they could perhaps help you with, so that you're better informed to perhaps support that improving engagement. So I've put a link to the improving gender balance team there, take you to their Education Scotland page. They have a Twitter as well, which is linked on that page. Ours is linked on the first slide there, back to digilearn.scot, but hopefully you've seen that. It's probably where you've signed up. And I've just pointed towards some of the courses that we run. So we have courses to support computing science, particularly in primary, that first one, the microbit for everyone. And we've just got, I'm going to be putting them up on Twitter in the next few days. I know most of you probably won't be working tomorrow, but maybe to pick up on Friday or next week. Keep an eye out for some tweets around the University of the Highlands and Islands. We have provided some funding to provide CLPL places there around computing science and also cyber security, and that's for everyone. Some of the courses are paid, some of them are paid for, some of them are contributed to, so you can have a look at the web pages and see what those courses are offering, but you might want to take some of that further so that you're better able to make use of any funding that you, if you're successful in that bid. There's also a recorded Improving Gender Balance and Equalities webinar on our website, and there are some lesson plans that have been designed with improving gender balance in mind as well, and also a summary of an OECD paper on improving gender balance, and again some strategies in there you might want to consider alongside your application. But that's everything from me. I will share the link to those slides so you've got just a kind of quick guide to those links, but I'll stop sharing and I'll hand over to Kraig and Maha. But thank you very much.
Brilliant, and thank you, George. So I think probably the best place to start is to assume that maybe not everybody on the call is familiar or aware of Digital Xtra Fund and what we do. So I'll give a very brief summary of that. So it was created back in 2016. It was initially funded and managed by Skills Development Scotland, but the intention was always to spin it out to become an independent charity. And in 2017, that happened. So if you look at previous grant recipients, for example, the first two funding rounds were slightly different because the program changed when it became an independent charity. But since the third round, it's been run by myself, and then Maha joined us almost 2 years ago, and we support extracurricular computing activities that engage young people in digital tech. And they can be run through schools, but they can also be run through libraries libraries or community centers. So basically anyone that's a registered charity, registered company, school, college, university, local authority, chartered body. These are all just examples of previous grant recipients. They can apply. Unfortunately, you can't apply if you're a sole trader, but you could work potentially with a school and you could be, say, a third-party provider, but they would need to be the main applicant, for example, in that situation. We run on an annual basis. So as George said there, our plan is to open applications at the end of January in 2023 for activities that will be delivered during the 2023-2024 academic year. So there is a bit of a delay, but obviously there's a period that we need to go through a process to select which applications are successful. To give you an idea, we had 94 applications for this current academic year, and we're currently supporting 35 of them. You can apply for up to £5,000, and you can basically ask for nearly anything. It's very wide open, as long as you can justify it as part of your plan. So you can include equipment, obviously very, very popular. You can include training. You can include room hire if that's an actual cost that you need to have. You can include transport, which is something that some projects in rural areas potentially struggle with. We had a primary school in Aberdeenshire. They went on a field trip to Aberdeen University last week, and they put up a big story about it on Twitter, and that was paid for through the grant. So there is a lot of variety. I won't get into it too much. But I think the key thing is that it supports extracurricular computing activities. So activities that relate to, say, digital literacy, or staying safe online, or searching for jobs, or researching online, those, or vlogging, blogging, videography, photography, editing, they would not be applicable. So the typical type of project that we support would be, say, a code club, but that's not the only thing. And probably the best thing is to look at previous grant recipients to get an idea. But if your idea is a sort of typical code club, or I use the sort of slightly more generic term tech club, because it doesn't always have to be just about coding, then that is something that we definitely would be looking to support. It has to be delivered entirely within Scotland, although you don't have to be based in Scotland to apply, but the project itself has to be delivered within Scotland. I think I mentioned, but you can apply up to £5,000, and it has to have a primary audience of young people aged 16 and under. We do have a few projects this year that are targeting, they're using family learning as a strategy, and that's perfectly fine, as long as the primary audience is young people aged 16 and under. So that, in a nutshell, is what we do. As George mentioned there, we do run some webinars during the application process, which is about 2.5 months, and we will run 2 or 3 webinars. We're planning to run a few in-person ones this coming year as well, so keep an eye on social media and whatnot for that. At Digital Extra Fund on Twitter is our most active channel. But those are more about, as George says, you sit down, you read this, landed on your desk, you read the question, and you don't maybe understand it, and you're just kind of looking for a very quick sort of, this is what they're looking for. Those webinars are more about that. Ideally, though, what we would prefer is that you've already had a chance to think about what you would like to deliver, and that's more what this is. What is it? What are the conversations you should be having 3 to 4 months before applying, or what are the things you should be thinking about 3 to 4 months before applying? And this is, Maha, since she's got a background in STEM education, I came from Edinburgh Science Festival, so we both have a little bit of experience with that. Neither of us have been teachers, though, so we don't have maybe that direct experience, but we have supported over 100, almost 150 projects over the past 5 years. So this is based on really what we've learned through those grant awards. So I'll briefly refer to the application. If you haven't seen it, though, it will be available on our website in January. So don't worry, though, if you haven't seen it, but I will briefly refer to it so that you can, if watching back, you can understand what I'm talking about. So the application is 10 questions long. If you've applied before, there will be a slight change to it this year. We are tweaking it slightly to based on feedback that we received last year, but it will be for the most part the same. So if you applied previously or read it previously, that's to your benefit. It's mostly an online application, although obviously because we don't want to exclude anybody, you can download an offline Word version that you can complete and email in as well. The first question is a project summary, and I think that's probably the best place for me to start in terms of what you should be thinking about 3 to 4 months or even more in advance. Arguably, this is the most important question in the application. The applications are evaluated by a panel. It's not chosen by Maha and I at whim. They're evaluated. There is a set scoring methodology, which is in the guidelines. And the panel is made up of people from industry as well as people from the education and skills sector. And not to drop George in it, but he's been kindly volunteering to be on that panel for a few years. So if you're asking for him for advice at some point in the future, it may mean that he's not allowed to evaluate your application, for example, because we do ask the panelists to declare any conflicts of interest. But so the project summary, what we're really looking for here is not a general thing. We really are looking for something with a bit more detail. So you kind of have to think about things like how often are you going to meet? Probably the most common is weekly, but maybe you want to do it, fortnightly, or maybe you want to do it twice a week. Is it going to be lunchtime or after school? After school tends to be a bit more of a challenge for applicants from more rural areas, so they tend to deliver it during lunchtime. But lunchtime has its own challenges in that they obviously, the children and young people have to eat, and then you don't have as much time to maybe interact with them or show them a new project, especially one that is maybe a bit more complicated. You have to decide, are you going to deliver the same club to the same young people over the entire year? Or do you want to divide this into maybe 2, 3, or even 4 cohorts so that you can engage more young people? Obviously, that means that maybe you're not engaging with those individual young people for as long. Maybe it's 8 weeks instead of, like I say, the whole year. But you need to decide what works best for you, and that will really drive the type of content, which is what you kind of need to come up with next. Shorter cohorts of, say, 8 to 10 weeks, obviously you don't have to come up with as much content because you can repeat that. Whereas if you're doing it for the whole year, you have to come up with a lot more content. You have to decide what you as the person delivering it might want to feature. So for example, there's sort of 2 main approaches that we see. There's the first, which I call the smorgasbord approach, where you're buying a couple pieces of lots of different kit. Obviously, most schools should have microbits by now, so you'll have those. But maybe you want to buy a couple Sphero bolts and a couple Sphero indies and maybe one Marty robot and maybe a couple sets of Lego, which are, those are some of the more popular pieces of equipment that are purchased with the grant award. The other side is sort of the all-in approach. Do you want to go all in and you want to run a Lego club? In which case, you're going to need enough Lego sets to, say, engage 20 to 30 young people at a time. Typically, we see sort of code clubs being, or tech clubs being sort of 20 to 25. If we have a lot more than that, we tend to see that they don't have as much opportunity to engage with young people. There's more attrition. There's always going to be attrition, but don't worry about that too much. It's just one of these things that happens, especially as competing activities like football or whatever clubs are available. But you have to decide, are you going to go all in? What are other schools and maybe your local authority doing? And this is a really key conversation that you could be having now versus in the spring when the applications are about to close or whatnot. Because if a lot of other schools in your area are doing Lego and potentially participating, say, in First Lego League, because they have 3 levels, they have Explore, Discover, and Challenge, you might want to work with them, and then you can have sort of your own little mini group. You can work together with the other educators in those other schools for potential like joint CPD or whatnot. They might be able to say to you, actually, we went down this pathway and we would highly recommend you don't. They might also say, look, we bought a bunch of Sphero bolts for our code club. Why don't you buy a bunch of Marty robots for yours? And then we can switch equipment partway through. But those are the types of conversations that if you have now, when it comes time to apply, I can assure you, as someone reading the application, you can tell when those conversations have been had and people are thinking about these things a lot more. The other thing about Digital Xtra Fund is that, as Maha mentioned, we're largely supported by industry, and not only does that give us an opportunity, but we also strongly believe anyway that the idea of teaching skills without giving it context is not as strong as providing context. And one of the best ways to provide context is through project-based learning or industry involvement. We are lucky that a lot of our industry partners want to get involved, so we can facilitate those types of engagements, but there might be opportunities for you to engage with industry in your own area or to organize something remotely. And again, going back to that idea of there being sort of maybe 2, 3, or 4 cohorts or a year, or even if you do one cohort, just having engagements on a regular basis, those are the types of things that you can start to investigate now, so that when you put them in your project plan, you can feel confident. And that brings me to the project plan, which is sort of the looking like it's going to be the third question in the new application. So I'm going to share my screen quickly, George. Hopefully I'm able to do that. And this is a mock project plan that we have sort of, let me just open it so I can continue talking without being distracted. Thank you. So this is a mock project plan that was actually a real project plan that we have sort of tweaked, so it becomes a sample versus sort of something so specific. But this was a primary school in Angus that delivered a project last year that was extremely successful. So we ask, when you're doing your project plan, to sort of break it down by month, and to sort of break it down by the different types of activities that you're going to be including in your project plan. And so obviously the first beginning is sort of planning and training, procurement. Procurement usually takes longer than people expect, so I would say overestimate on that than you maybe think. But you can see here they've broken it down by month. They also have things like industry engagement days. So this particular teacher, she knew that she needed to have 4 industry engagement days over the span of her code club. So this will be something that we're actually going to have on our website that you can download when applications open. So you'll be able to look at it. You certainly don't need to copy this. That is not that's not a requirement, nor is it something that will guarantee that you receive funding. It is a guideline. It is a sample. It is an idea of a previous project that was successful, that you can get some inspiration from. But it gives you an idea of the level of detail that we're looking for as well. When the successful grant recipients are contacted in June or late May, they do go through a due diligence process with Maha and I, where we sit down and we go through the application with them. And I would say the 2 things that we almost always require, not always, often require additional information on is the project plan and the budget, which is something that I'll talk about shortly as well. But this is where the idea of this sample project plan came from, because we actually developed this last year to help with that process when we ask for additional information. And you can see here they had multiple cohorts as well. So that's the project plan, and you'll be able to, as I say, input that online. I think the other thing that we need to mention is that just because I know teachers especially, they're a bit worried that if you put something in writing, it's cemented in there. That's not how this works. There is going to be things that change. There is going to be things that go wrong. We've had teachers move on from certain grant recipients this year. Obviously, COVID was a massive factor last year, even though we were sort of a little bit back to normal. But people were still off for extended periods of time. We are a small charity that we're genuinely here to try and help. So there's no point in us putting restrictions on you if you aren't able to, say, deliver exactly what you said you would, or especially if you find a better way to do something. And so just because you put it here isn't meaning you have to do it. It means that it shows that you've thought about it. And honestly, that's the most important thing. So, but like I say, this will be something that you'll be able to download on our website as a resource in the new year when we open applications. So I don't actually like sharing while I'm talking because I can't see people as well. So I'm going to stop sharing that. But I'm going to talk about one other thing though, and then maybe we'll open up to questions, and then I'd like to talk a little bit more about what George was talking about there, about the audience as well, which is, so for us, it's groups underrepresented in tech, which is often girls and young women, considering the strong underrepresentation of women in tech, but it also could be groups in rural areas and groups in more deprived areas. And we use Scottish Government data to sort of define those, but I'll talk more about that later. In terms of what I want to talk about now here briefly though, and I'll pull it up on my screen, and I did mention it there, is budget. So this is another sample budget that we developed last year. to guide those that maybe aren't as comfortable or experienced developing a budget for a project. So this was, you can, as I say, you can ask for equipment, you can ask for accessories. A lot of people forget batteries when they're putting in the budget. Batteries are very, very important. If not, also battery chargers. Storage boxes, you know, you buy all this expensive kit, you don't want it lying around. As I say, training. There's opportunity to maybe buy some prizes or certificates for some of your participants. Office supplies. Yeah, no, we appreciate schools have a lot of this stuff already, but we don't, you know, we know money's tight. So if you need a certain amount of office supplies to run your project effectively, then absolutely put that in your budget. Admin cost. So it's not just about, you know, facing the time it takes, well, you're facing young people and delivering project, but if you need to do some work, you know, when you're not in front of the young people, then you can include that as part of the budget as well. So these are all ideas. I think, again, like going back to what I said earlier, the two questions that we probably have to go back and ask for more information the most about is the project plan and the budget. And so we're hoping that these sample budgets and project plans will help alleviate some of that, because then we can get you the money quicker. Because putting something in just sort of tech and then a cost for it, or admin and then a cost for it. Unfortunately, while I appreciate, again, maybe you don't want to put something in there and then be held to it, we do need more detail and we need more indication that you have sort of thought about it. And so, you know, I mentioned procurement earlier. A lot of schools especially need to go through the council procurement team in order to purchase things. I can tell you there is a wide variety of prices for the exact same piece of kit that we see every year. And that's because each local authority has negotiated their own rates for equipment. And it's not usually what's on Amazon. So if you are having to go through those channels, for example, that's a conversation you might be wanting to have now. Once you decide what type of equipment that you want to feature, and if you're going to do that sort of all-in approach with one piece of kit or a smorgasbord approach, contacting your local procurement team to see how much that costs. Again, we appreciate things might change, and we do ask you to confirm your budget just before we make that first payment. But at least, again, here, it gives you an idea of how much you can ask for. We also, I would say that it's very common, and again, not to single out teachers, but it just seems to be the trend that we see, that teachers don't necessarily want to ask for too much because they're not used to maybe the way grants work. The way grants work are different than sort of your normal budget. Ask for what you need. Obviously up to £5,000, but ask for what you need. That being said, if you need more than £5,000, you can apply for up to £5,000 and then indicate that you're going to get additional funding from the Tesco Blue token or the ASDA Green token. We've seen schools use that to sort of leverage additional equipment for their project. You might get it as a donation from your parents association. So these are other approaches for other projects that have costed more than £5,000, but have still, we were able to fund up to £5,000 for it. So yeah, these are the things you maybe want to think about now. I mentioned kit earlier. So yeah, the most popular pieces of kit are, yeah, George, yeah, exactly. So the most popular pieces of kit are Lego Spike, which is essential for sort of younger kids, or Prime for older primary or secondary. Sphero Indies or Bolts, Indies being for younger, Bolts being for older. Marty the Robot's very popular. Microbit and Microbit accessories are very, very popular. Vex Robotics is very, very popular. I would say those are probably the top 5 equipment. But maybe it's not equipment that you need. Maybe, well, I mean, laptops and iPads are equipment, but maybe that's what you need, and you want to do more on-screen coding with, say, Microsoft MakeCode. Maybe you want to be a games development club instead of a physical computing club. Maybe you want to focus more on Scratch, excuse me. So, you know, again, those are the things that you need to think about. I will say that, you know, I've used those 5 pieces of kit that I just named. I've used them all. The resources are amazing, especially Microbit. Hopefully most of you have seen the Microbit website or been on the Microbit website. But I think one of the advantages of perhaps being sort of an all-in on one type of kit, for example, although it would work for the smorgasbord, it would just be a bit more work, is those websites are brilliant for just going in and picking 4 or 5 resources that you, or 4 or 5 lessons that you want to deliver, say, as I say, during those particular lessons. And then maybe at the end, you have a bit of free time to let the young people explore and invent their own thing. A lot of them also have competitions related to them. So Lego has First Lego League. Microbit has Do Your Bit. Vex has a Vex robotics competition. I don't think Marty and Sphero necessarily have competitions, at least not that I'm aware of, but there is, you can obviously make your own. So, those are ideas, again, that you might want to take into consideration when you're making your project plan as well. So those are all sort of tips and tricks, if you will, of what the first let's say 40% of the application will be, and based on the 150 applications that we've approved over the years, that's where I would suggest you can maybe help yourself now or help yourself later by having conversations and investigating things now. George, before I move on to say talking about target audience and stuff, I don't know if we want to open it up for any questions about anything I just said, because I realized I just talked for about 20 minutes straight. So.
Yep, absolutely. If anyone's got any points, pop in the chat. I'm just going to have a wee look at the Jamboard and see. I don't see any questions that have popped up. Nobody's posted one to the Jamboard yet.
If anyone has any examples as well, maybe if they have already, their school or they themselves or their organization has ran any tech clubs or code clubs that you believe were successful, or you have an experience with maybe a piece of kit I didn't mention there, please throw that in the chat or on the Jamboard, as George mentions, or just pop on and have a chat. I don't know if they can actually turn their mic on, but yeah, where George mentioned we were experts earlier, I would not classify myself as an expert, but I do. I'm lucky enough to have a lot of conversations with lots of people. So, Ms. Campbell, do we have to purchase equipment through procurement, or can we use Amazon, etc.? That's up to you. That's more. Well, I should say it's up to your school. If you're with a school, or your organization, it depends on your own policy. We, as a charity, we don't really care who you buy it from as long as it's a legitimate vendor. Where that can sometimes be a little bit sketchy is eBay. So if you're buying something off of eBay and you can't, say, get an approved invoice or something, that can sometimes be a problem. But whether it's Amazon or some other TTS or some other online vendor that's maybe not listed under your local authority's procurement system, that doesn't matter to us. So it's whatever is easier or allowed by your school or organization. Yeah, I see. Oh, the Jamboard here. I just realized I'm still sharing, so I'm going to stop sharing. Nope, I don't see anything on there. So
I was going to say, Craig, as well, like Robotical do give away like Marty for a 2-week period for teachers and educators to try. And also, like, Raising Robots have been running so many different sessions online about Lego kits. So it might be just it's worth looking at the kits which are available, going into like some of the trainings, or even getting Marty over for 2 weeks, see if that works or not for the session. So that's something could be done. And hopefully we are planning to deliver some in-person sessions once the applications are open. Then the educators can come and see those different kits as well. So that would give some idea.
Yeah, so Raising Robots is a company that we work with that sells it. They're an authorized Lego dealer. You do get better deals by going through them than typically buying it, say, on Amazon or at the Lego store. There are other authorized dealers out there, so by no means do you have to use them, but that is who we work with. Robotical make and sell Marty. And have lots of resources. Microbit Educational Foundation does the Microbit. Sphero does Sphero, and Vex does Vex. So what type of activities would be covered by training in the budget? Any training that you can basically clearly justify as required to help with your engagement with young people, then that would be included. So if you need training on how to use the Microbit or how to use any of the devices that I've mentioned, Marty, for example. So we had a school this year. I think it was I want to say 200 or maybe £250. Let me, maybe you can pop in the budget and take a look at their budget. But they had Robotical come out, deliver in-person training at the school for them and a couple other primary schools that joined them. I popped along as well, and that was covered by the budget. So as long as you can basically draw a direct line from the activity to the training, or I should say maybe from the training to activity, you can include that. What date will the applications be open? Sorry if this is mentioned, Teams froze. No problem at all. The end of January. We don't want to say a specific date yet because things can move around a bit, but it will be the end of January. And I can tell you that they will close on the 6th of April because that's the day before Good Friday and that's the day that we close.
Just on that, the Marty training is about £300.
£300. Okay, thank you. Can community organizations apply and do they have to be connected to schools? Yes, community organizations can apply. No, they don't have to be connected to schools. So this year we have 35 grant recipients. 26 of them are schools, but the rest are non-school delivery partners. They do have to be, they can't, like I said, they just can't be a sole trader. So as long as they are a registered company or a registered organization or public body organization, two of those 35 are libraries, for example, then that's fine. So the focus is more on developing the skills of physical computing science and not, for example, on digital music, art, artifact production, such as movies. Yes, that is correct. The focus is more on not necessarily just physical. It could be on-screen computing, so Scratch or Make Code Arcade or Code.org, Idea Foundation. Those are all popular tools as well. But no, things like you can code music, so I won't say not music. You can absolutely code music. You can code art. In fact, if you look on our Twitter page, yesterday there was someone and they were painting with Sphero bolts. They had a little tray with some blobs of paint and they programmed the Sphero bolts to drive around and run through the paint and paint with the bolts. So they incorporated art and Spheros, but the computing element has to be the primary focus. Yes, things like video editing and photo editing, vlogging, blogging, they generally are not something that we would support. There was a school in East Lothian 2 years ago that we did a little bit of work with on vlogging. To be honest with you, it didn't work out as well because they found the equipment quite difficult to use, but they were vlogging about computing, their computing club. So again, the focus was more on their computing club than the vlogging, but there you go. So there is a way to mix sometimes, but as long as the computing element is sort of the key part of it. George has a comment there. Our team can support for free, and there is also the ES STEM grants for training and development costs. Education Scotland STEM grants might want to consider those and then use this for other costs. Absolutely.
I think, sorry, Craig, I was going to say, just I think to qualify that one, I just want to pop it in the chat. Our STEM grants at Education Scotland cannot be used for equipment, and therefore that's why I think it might be worth considering. This one is, I think, a fantastic opportunity because it can be used for equipment. So instead of having 2 grants for training, that might be something people consider, and you might get a bit more value. Whereas if you apply for this for training, then you can't use the STEM grants for equipment or resources or anything else. So that might be something to consider about balancing, but obviously 2 different funds with 2 different purposes, but it might be something, I say, just to get that extra value.
Yeah, and I should highlight there with what George said there as well. While training can be part of your budget, there has to be a direct engagement element of the project. So the training is a precursor to the activity, but the activity has to be part of the application. While I completely agree that training in CPD is a hugely important element of what we're all trying to achieve here, our main focus is actually giving the young people a positive engagement with technology. Mrs. Brown with an E. If I work across 2 schools, can both schools apply and share resources funded if successful? So I'm not sure I 100% understand, but what I would suggest is that, so in the application, there is a main applicant, and then there are activity partners, which could be industry, it could be other schools, it could be a third-party organization that provides content. I would suggest in that instance that they both apply, and then in the project plan you describe how the equipment will be shared between the two schools. If both schools were to apply with the very similar application, then we would probably not be able to fund both. If both schools applied with very different applications, then they would be considered differently. So I guess it kind of depends on what you're planning with that. But I would say that the more sort of cluster approach that is used, or collaboration that is highlighted in the application, those are always strong points for the panel when considering it. So George has some more comments in the chat there, which you can check out, or he may have already highlighted them. So I'll skip to Mr. Walsh. How long would the club be expected to run for in the plan? Would it be over the period of the next school year? Very good. So two parts to that question. Part A, the grant delivery period is from anywhere after the 1st of July 2023 to the 30th of June 2024. It doesn't have to run that entire period. We actually have some projects that maybe only run for a few weeks. Obviously, if you'd want to maybe justify, though, why it's only running, like if it was a large event. So, for example, we're supporting Edinburgh Science Festival this year. That obviously has a very sort of specific window as to when that will be delivered. But if you were a school or community center who are engaging young people for a longer period of time, then you'd want to highlight maybe why you are only delivering it for a shorter period of time. There is a question, though, in the application called sustainability, and we do expect all the projects to be sustainable beyond that 1-year delivery period. But the grant is specifically for 1 year, which is from the 1st of July to the 30th of June. I don't know if Mr. or Mrs. Sorry, but Mackenzie, we don't have a computing department at Carrick. I'm a business ed teacher, and we want to introduce cybersecurity with new training in it through UHI with a view of implementing. Can we apply for a grant for anything cybersecurity related? Yes, you can. So there's actually, it's not been put up on Twitter yet, but Maha, maybe you want to drop something in the chat there. We are actually running an event with Sphero on the 5th of December of how you can use Sphero bolts to educate about cybersecurity. I think what I need to be clear, and I don't have a cyber background, so I'm going to try and say this in a way that maybe doesn't shoot myself in the foot, is you don't want to do a project that's about being safe online, but you can do a project that's about teaching young people about cybersecurity, jobs, roles within cybersecurity, how to identify potential potential errors in coding. You can teach about ethical hacking. We have a speaker from Abertay University that's participating with one of our projects in January about ethical hacking. So hopefully that answers your question. UHI, depends on whom at UHI, because UHI is obviously massive, but we have supported the STEM office in Inverness, the UHI office there, on a regular basis over the past few grant cycles. So there might be an opportunity there to work with something that they've already created. George, you've got your hand up, so...
I just want to come in on the cyber stuff. I think there's that reminder, I think you said at the start that this is extracurricular as well, so you can set up a department, but we do have funding for cyber security. I've put Scott's email address in there, so if it is a curricular thing, you're looking to develop that, get in touch with us at DigiLearn. I think that's a great point as well about, you know, the links to where it is in terms of activities, and I believe... I hope I've got it right. We have the funding secured for access to Try Hack Me for all learners undertaking the NPA in cyber. So there's funding for things like that are coming and are available. So if it is looking at cyber or developing a computing department, if I'm right, that's not the right process for this, and I don't think those UHI courses, again, we funded them from Education Scotland, the Scottish Government, so there is funding in place for a lot of that training from the UHI that I mentioned, and I've mentioned them as maybe that's something you want to do additionally, so that you're better. I think someone made the point, I think it was Helen Harper, asked about, do you need to have the skills to be able to run one of these clubs, and those are just other options that might be there that you're looking to take a next step in. But I think the real focus on this is on that club, and what, as you say, Craig, what the learners are doing. If it's anything about developing your department, your school, your skills, get in touch, and we can follow that up at Digital. That's certainly our role, but I'm sure Kraig and Maha can help with that as well. But the focus again is back to that club, so it is about running a club, just where a few of those questions are coming into those. Hope I've not muddied that too much at the start, but there is opportunities available, but that's certainly us, and I think they fit around this.
Yeah, and George, you're 100% right on that. But I will note, will add, we're under no illusion that some of the equipment that is purchased with a Digital Extra Fund grant might find its way into being used in the classroom sometimes. And we would obviously 100% hope that the training that maybe is gained through the extracurricular coding club can be useful in the classroom as well. But George is right. The grant needs to be very much tied to an extracurricular activity, lunchtime, after school, weekend, those type of activities, more so than something that's delivered during class time. The one gray area potentially is that we do sometimes fund touring programs to go out and deliver activities, say during class time, if those skills or equipment is not something that's available within the school. So that could be something as well that might muddy the waters a bit there. But yeah, we have funded touring programs in the past, including Aberdeen Science Centre, where Maha was, and Generation Science, and Young Engineers and Science Clubs, to name a few. Sorry, go ahead, Maha.
Sorry, I was just saying, like, if you feel you're not confident, you can obviously get some support. So where if you are successful, as we mentioned earlier, we are there to support you. We can get that facilitation of industry engagement, get some volunteers from our industry partners to come and help deliver your coding club, even reaching out to like STEM ambassadors who help with the volunteering side of things. You can sign up as an educator and get some volunteers to help out. And also one other thing which I remembered, I'll just say it, is including some kind of national programs like the Young STEM Leader program, where you have these young people leading or supporting with the delivery. So what the kind of format we usually say is maybe deliver a initial 4 to 6 weeks cohort with your P6, P7s, who would then be able to help you deliver the next cohort or the next session for younger people. So they are there as digital leaders, STEM ambassadors, or whatever you want to call them, STEM leaders, to help support with the delivery. So try to incorporate those different like national programs, like Young STEM Leader program or anything else you are trying to run. Also, George mentioned something about like the Hi-Fi award as well, George, when we were having a chat. So you can include some of there is a registration cost, George, is it, for that?
Yeah, the High Five Award's available from I think it's Youth Scotland, and it's available for anybody from the age of 5 up. But it does come with the cost is, I think it's £6 per certificate, but that comes because it carries SCQF points and it is SQA accredited, so it is an actual qualification that they get. There's a really simple, you can have a look at it online, the High Five Award, and we've looked at it. If that's something people were interested in, we could certainly speak to them about maybe designing a template for a kind of code club. But it comes with a wee booklet. Learners fill out some targets, things they'd like to learn over a time scale, and if the teacher and the learner can check that and say that they've met those targets, send it away, and it comes as a proper qualification rather than a certificate. And that might be a really big target, I think, as well. When I was speaking to Kraig and Maha the other day about this, I think the opportunity to think, I don't think it's extracurricular should take away from any of the other priorities you have in your school, and I think that attainment targets, if you can get your learners a qualification through taking part in the extracurricular club, you can improve that gender imbalance and other inequalities. You know, if you're in a particularly deprived area, that might be something, or you're rural, those are, you know, you've got those in they just come to your school naturally. You don't have to target them particularly, but I think you can be looking at, again, the DYW programme as well. So there's a lot you could be wrapping up in this, ticking a lot of boxes for your school. I don't want to say just by running an extracurricular club, but I think rather than seeing it as that extra thing, I think you could be hitting a lot of policy for your school, and really tying things up with those partners and industry and qualifications and everything else. So it's definitely worth having a wee think about what you could be hitting by running this, rather than just thinking of it as a an after school or a lunchtime club. I think there's a lot more to it than that, as Kraig and Maha have talked about.
Not a standalone thing. It's so much integrated with what you're doing already in school or community setting, I would say.
Yeah. So, George, I'll answer the rest of the questions, but I might have to say that we've only got about 10 minutes left, so probably won't be able to add any more questions. But if anyone wants to email us or George, you can email me and Maha at info@digitalextrafund.scot. Extra spelled with an X, not an E. It's all one word. If you just Google Digital Extra Fund, it'll come up. So you can email us at info@, or I'm sure, as I say, if you get in touch with George at the DigiLearn team, they can either answer it or forward your question onto us. So Helen, Harper, and Miss Sexton, you both sort of asked sort of similar questions. What is it applicable for primary school, and where do we start? Yes, it's applicable for any young people aged 16 and under. I would say about 2/3 of our current engagement achieved by previous grant awards is actually at the primary level, mostly sort of P5 to P7. We do have some in these sort of earlier years using, say, Indie and even Microbit, but it does tend to be sort of maybe slightly older years. As Maha mentioned, though, getting maybe some of those older pupils to become digital leaders in the school and helping out with the younger years is a really good idea. You can also get them recognized for their effort, called the Young STEM Leader Program, which is ran by CERC. CERC also run the STEM Ambassadors program in Scotland, so it's a one-stop shop. And Maha, for example, she started the first code club at Aberdeen Science Centre, and she had a lot of help from a STEM ambassador on that. So they're a great resource. They're going back to Miss Harper's question there, where to start. So for me, I sort of had my first microbit. I did coding at university, true, but I didn't really code much after that. And then about 15 years later, I started doing this. I worked at the Science Festival, but I hadn't done a lot of coding. I got my first microbit about 3-4 years ago. I went on their website. It's a brilliant website. Looked up at their projects, and their projects lay it out really, really well. It's block coding, so very, very. If you have a little bit of understanding about block coding, then it's very easy to pick up. If you don't have a familiarity with block coding, check out Scratch or Scratch Junior resources. Scratch Junior is very, very simple to start with. It's icons instead of text. It very much teaches you the basics of block coding. But if you have a little bit of understanding of block coding, I would really highlight the Microbit website as a great resource to sort of build your skills. And like I said, they have loads of different lessons that you can sort of pick in and plug and play within your club. Code Club is sort of, which is not just the term Code Club, but the actual organization Code Club, which is ran by Raspberry Pi Foundation. They're probably the most popular program that you can use. But there are other programs that some of our grant recipients have used, is code.org. Very, very American, but it's, pretty much still something you can use here, just maybe not align as well to maybe some of the curriculum links or whatever. But Idea Foundation is another organization. Someone mentioned cyber earlier as well. Digital Skills Education is another organization we've worked with, and they use Cyber Skills Live. So they have a lot of online cyber lessons. But for me, I think, Lego or Vex are both brilliant. The app for Lego especially is amazing. There is a higher upfront cost for Lego, as you might expect, but the app is also amazing, which you might expect. But if you're looking for something quick, cheap, and easy, like I say, online resources like Scratch Junior, or Microbit. A Microbit is only about £15. Very, very easy to sort of learn activities using the Microbit. There's also cyber materials on the computing science team for cybersecurity. Try Hackney. Yep. So George, you mentioned that. Looks like there's some chat amongst people attending, which is always good to see. If you're successful, when would the funding be available to the clubs? Good question. So you are informed that you're successful at the end of May, early June. Again, we try and give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room in case things happen, but basically late May. You'll then be invited to sit down with Ma and I and go through the application for a due diligence process. Assuming that the budget and the project plan are fine and we don't need any additional information on anything else, then you would be awarded 60% of the grant before the summer holidays. If it rolls into the summer holidays, and obviously, you may be not able to get us that information until August or September, that could put a delay on the funds. But because we need to sign off on the funds. But the initial payment is 60%. You would then get 30% at the project midpoint, which is usually around Christmas. And then you get the final 10% at the end of the project once you submit your final evaluation. There is a short evaluation at the midpoint as well that you need to complete, or I should say update more than evaluation. So there is an element of managing your cash flow with that as well, because you will only have 60% of the grant from the start to about December. And then you get the other 30%, and then you get the final 10% at the end. So it might mean you have to buy some of the equipment in January. It might mean you have to cover that cash through other resources. I will say, though, that once you are promised the funding and you sign a little contract saying you are, it is set aside for you. So even if I go away and Maha goes away and the charity goes away, the funding, we're not allowed to touch that. The funding is there for you no matter what. Obviously, that's not going to happen. We're not going anywhere. But I'm just saying, you can tell your senior leadership team that the funding is absolutely there for you. So even if you don't get it until December, until in the spring, you will get it. Lindsay, I work in FE, therefore we wouldn't be able to run extracurricular activity, but are hoping to include the tech with our vocational burst. So, I mean, we support New College Lanarkshire, we support Northeast College Scotland, we support Northeast Scotland, College. We support West College Scotland. So we do work with a load of FE organizations. We work with Energy Skills Partnership, CDN on First Lego League. First Lego League is run in most of the colleges in Scotland. So it does need to target young people 16 and under. So maybe that's potentially a barrier, and I would agree with that because that is something that we require. But we do work with lots of colleges and some universities as well. So unfortunately, though, if it's not targeting young people 16, if it's targeting 17 plus in terms of age, no, unfortunately, you would not be considered. People's High School, we have a young STEM leaders leading a coding club in S2 and F4, and that's why we're interested in the fund, and that's why we're interested in you applying. So that sounds perfect. We are based in an earlier setting. Is funding open to this age group? I know 16 is the max. There is no minimum. So we do have we have supported nurseries. Usually those nurseries are part of a primary school, if I'm honest, but there's no reason why they have to be. It just sort of is a bit easier, I guess, maybe to apply if you have that direct connection, but there's no reason why. I think, like I mentioned indies earlier, B-bots, blue bots are very, very common. The code mouse and go, as long as it's teaching them computational thinking, breaking down things into parts and problem solving in a digital sense, it doesn't have to be coding sort of in the traditional sense, if we want to say that. We also want to upskill staff so we can put coding into science courses, which is People's High School. So as long as the training is directly related to the extracurricular activity, yes, you can do that, absolutely. And Maha's dropped our email in there, so that's brilliant. Helen saying thank you for coming. I really appreciate that. And I'll let George come back to you about the Glow account, because I don't have access to Glow, so I don't have any idea how that would happen. And then George has put his contact details in there as well, so thank you very much. And then Mrs. Wilkinson, can the teacher apply, or does it have to be a senior manager? So we wouldn't be an individual that applies. It would be an organization that applies, or a school, and then you or the senior manager would be listed as the main contact point. And as long as they have the legal right to enter into a grant contract with Digital Extra Fund, meaning that they can manage the funding, basically. They have access to the accounts either through, for however it works at your school. Some schools go through the council. Some schools have their own bank account. 32 local authorities makes it very, very difficult to sometimes know different situations. But it's not an individual that applies. It's an organization. So as long as that works for you, that works for us. And then thank you for all the information. Thank you again, Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Bunton for joining us. And that's 5 o'clock, George. So wow, I'm out of breath, but I hope that was helpful and useful for everyone. And as I say, if we didn't get to your question, I know we didn't get to talk much about target audience, so apologies for that. But if you have any further questions, drop us an email now, or you can wait till the application opens. You can join one of our webinars in the spring, or you can maybe jump into one of our in-person ones, which we're hoping to deliver as well. Thank you.
And I think as well, sorry, I don't know if that was what you shared at the start, Maha, but I know that you've just published the impact report, haven't you, with examples as well? are you about?
So the 2021-22 impact report is being designed right now. So unfortunately, it will be on our website in the next few weeks. Unfortunately, it's not there now. If you do go onto our website, digitalextrafund.scot, there is a tab called grants, and you can look at all previous grants. And if you click on each round, there, except for round 7 and round 6, because round 7 is right now, and round 6, like I say, that'll be in a few weeks. But there is a link on all 3 to 5 that takes you to previous impact reports, which does have some case studies as well. Yes.
That's the round 5 one I've shared just now.
Brilliant. No, thanks very much to Kraig and Maha for presenting that, and thanks very much to everybody who came along and joined. And I think it's one of the ones we get asked a lot about, and I think it is a unique grant because of all the partnerships where it ties up with everything else, and because it's one of the ones it's a lot easier to get the equipment. I think it's a big thing. I know that the fund that we have at Education Scotland is about training and professional development only. Which means, and a lot of people fall up against that because they then, they can identify the training but can't get the kit. So, and again, just to reiterate, so there's a few bits coming in the chat. If there's anything about projects, about things you want to do around learning and teaching, or things in school, part of curriculum, get in touch with me or the team, and we can help you, put you in touch. And obviously, again, if there is those links to industry or extracurricular or partners, then Kraig and Maha can help with those as well, I'm sure, but obviously don't want you to get hundreds of inquiries about things that when you've got enough inquiries about the digital Xtra fund as well. So,
I mean, it'd be worth mentioning there very, very quickly the new partnership between Scotland is, Tech She Can, and CERC, which is the STEM Ambassadors Program, which is all about getting industry involved with schools, particularly secondary schools, but also primary schools. Obviously, I can't believe I haven't used these 3 letters, but DYW, Developing Young Workforce. Not every local authority, but every region in Scotland has a DYW group whose job is to help schools engage more with industry. So for that industry element, there is a whole question about industry engagement and contextualizing skills. So that might be worth having some conversations with them as well.
No, thanks so much to yourselves and to everybody who joined once again.